David Stearns is the most arrogant executive in professional sports, and his arrogance and ego are the death of the New York Mets. The Mets and the Phillies through the first 28 games of the season had the same exact record at 9-19. One team decided to swallow their pride and fire a manager that took them to a World Series. The Philadelphia Phillies have since been one of the best teams in baseball and are currently holding a playoff spot. The Mets, meanwhile, held on to Carlos Mendoza because David Stearns' ego and arrogance wouldn't let him admit that he made a mistake with Carlos Mendoza, so he instead kept him as the manager despite the entire fan base calling for him to be fired. David Stearns brought in Freddie Peralta to pair with Clay Holmes and Nolan McLean, but completely forgot to fill out the rest of the rotation with quality arms, despite the fact that it was clearly and obviously the team's biggest weakness. Instead, he decided to rely on three guys coming off of god-awful years, hoping that his pitching lab would be able to fix things and these guys would just miraculously bounce back. Kodai Senga, David Peterson, and Sean Manaea, however, have been terrible and are not getting any better. David Stearns traded Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien because he opted to get the shorter contract so that he could get the money off of the books sooner. Marcus Semien, however, has been one of the worst players in all of baseball, sporting a -0.5 B WAR and a 74 OPS plus. Pete Alonso was allowed to walk in free agency to sign with the Baltimore Orioles. David Stearns went to go scout Munetaka Murakami, opted to pass, and then chose to make a career middle infielder the replacement at first base. Once Jorge Polanco went completely MIA, Mark Vientos, who is one of the worst and most one-dimensional players in all of baseball, started to get a majority of the playing time at first base, and he has been horrendous. Brett Baty, for some reason, continues to be rostered on the Mets, despite the fact that he not only has a 600 OPS, but he has never once proven that he can be a consistently good hitter for an entire MLB season. David Stearns brought in Luis Robert, hoping to revive a guy who's been injury-prone and regressing badly over the last few years, and instead, much like Jorge Polanco, Luis Robert has been completely MIA. David Stearns' inability to put together a complete roster has forced the Mets to rush prospects to the big leagues before they're ready. Thank God Carson Bench and AJ Ewing have caught on, because Nolan McLean has been a roller coaster, and David Stearns may have completely ruined Jonah Tong. The simple fact is Juan Soto's prime is currently being wasted because David Stearns is wasting the greatest resource that any professional sports executive has access to: Steve Cohen's money.